I'll speak when Scott tells me to talk.
Okay, that sounds good. I'll give you the cues.
We have been live for 7 seconds. These guys have things to do. Let's talk about Better Than Fiction.
Hey, this will be Better Than Fiction, episode 319.
Woo!
I heard that perfectly. And as always, I'm your host, Deal Nilsson, joined by my other hosts,
Scott Sackett.
And
Barry,
we're waiting. He may be gone.
And Barry Burris.
Guys, I can't hear you. If I move my phone, I can't hear you. I'm gonna bail. I'm gonna bail on this one. We'll figure out something else for me later.
Okay. That's probably for the best if you can't hear us.
That was short-lived.
Yeah. Is he still here? I can't see my phone.
He's gone.
Okay.
He left.
Well,
Barry,
also, unfortunately, Barry could not. He's got technical difficulties, but we do have special guest.
Oh, Ellis Goodson. Our IQ went down by half with Barry leaving.
Oh, boy.
something. The average went down for sure.
Yeah.
All right, so what we're going to do, okay, so I guess we need to talk about the reason why we're doing this. We are all in our bunkers, our houses, trying to avoid getting the COVID-19 bug. So hopefully everybody's washing their hands and not hanging around a lot of people. So anyway.
And apparently there's been a big problem in Oklahoma City with people still going to the parks and not, I went by the park today and there was big groups of people playing Frisbee golf and stuff. And it's not as bad here in Oklahoma as it is in some other cities. But still, if one person gets it and you spread it, it's just unnecessary exposure to groups is just not encouraged at this point. And so we're practicing that,
outside Frisbee golf, if you're not real close to each other, that might be okay, right?
I think it might be, but these were large groups all together.
Gotcha.
More than 10 is what they're saying.
Yeah.
To avoid. This is like 30 people playing Frisbee golf.
I would probably keep it less than just whatever's in your household, personally. But that's just
and I know everyone says, well, I'm not going to get it or whatever. First off, you don't know that. It is highly contagious, apparently. But also, I know a guy that has it or is recovering from it. And he said, and he's a young guy in good health, and he said, it was like the worst thing ever, and you do not want this. He thought he was going to die. They literally thought he was going to die. So it is serious. You should do what you can to avoid it. Certainly for unnecessary things.
Right.
But we've gone to the grocery store and washed our hands afterwards and stuff like that. But, you got to do certain things for sure.
You got to eat and go to the bathroom.
Exactly. And you will need toilet paper.
Food and toilet paper.
Even though, as I saw on this video online, the guy had a stick with leaves on it, and he said, "Well, this is just as good as toilet paper." I go, maybe not. Or if so, I need to brush up on my poison ivy, poison oak identifications.
Right.
Yeah.
So
anyway,
let's do this. Let's keep it kind of positive.
Sure.
The COVID stuff's kind of a negative, a downer. No one wants to hear about that junk.
Yeah, you can hear about that anywhere.
Right. You guys have anything to talk about tonight? Any books?
You want me to go first?
Discussion. Should we address any of the thing about Diamond not shipping any books out?
Yeah, what do you know about it? Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
let's talk about it.
Well, so Ellis, you've heard about it. What do you know, Ellis?
That's what I know about it is that here the people that managed to get themselves into a monopoly position have all of a sudden they said, well, let's quit for a while. It's like, so what does that leave you? It leaves you with a whole lot of nothing.
Right. Think about if the Amazon guy did that. That's
yeah, exactly. It's like, hey, what? You mean you don't want to be in business anymore?
Yeah. Well, this is.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
This is extraordinary circumstances.
Yeah.
I think I spoke to the owner of my comic shop, and he felt like it was a good thing because it would help shops not incur debt while they potentially had no customers. And there was already something in place where they were not shipping to stores that were, I think, in a quarantined area or something like that. I forget how it was working, but and so because they're selling a periodical that's dated, there was some concern about would stores get stock after it was sellable and some of that kind of stuff. So
Well,
some people think it's a good thing. Now, I'm not so concerned about that, even though I think that exposes the weakness in the system, or in the distribution system. That is, I'm more concerned about the fact that a lot of publishers are telling their creators to stop working.
pencils down.
Pencils down is what they're saying.
Why would they say that? What's the purpose of that?
Well, Valiant has announced that they are halting publication. I mean, they're not. Valiant is, as I understand it, Valiant has said they're not going to. They're basically stopping making comics until further notice. So, now
I mean,
different
it's like
thing.
that's not good for anybody, though. The shops, the artists, the writers, the inkers. That's not good for anybody.
No. It's not good for anybody. But it's okay. So, I was. Well, I mean, before we started recording, we were talking about a bit. I won't name it, but a business in our city here, a large business that has its corporate offices here in Oklahoma City, and they have a large staff of artists. And apparently, now I don't know if it's all the artists, but apparently they have told 65 artists they've laid them off. And when I say laid off, I mean they've told them you will not have jobs after this. Your jobs are over.
Now,
So
why would that be?
well, because they're. Well, I don't know either. I don't.
Maybe
know
all the work
if-
is going to be done in China now.
Well, that's
Just kidding.
well. No.
Wuhan.
I mean,
Yeah,
you
Wuhan, yeah.
well, you say that jokingly, but this is a company that gets a lot of their product out of China. It's a company that sells home decor. Let's put it that way. That's their big business. A lot of it comes from
And their
China.
initials are HL.
Well, I didn't say that, but so maybe they are. Maybe they felt like they were overstaffed, and this is a good excuse to get rid of some of their staff. 65 artists seems like a lot of artists, though. My work. We have. I'm trying to think. In addition to me and my team, there's probably 30 artists at my work, and now these are all various types of jobs. Probably actually closer to 40, and out of those, I think about half of them they're working currently from home. Some of them are not working just because they don't have work to work on. In other words, they've said, well, during this slowdown, we're not getting orders, so there's no reason for us to be working.
Yeah.
And that may be in a
well, anywhere
position
artists
I'm in.
Anytime artists are lucky enough to be hired in mass, it's for some sort of product like animation or a game or something like that, or like this outfit had some use for them. And the moment you kink that pipeline, it's like they're the first to go. The layoffs that occur when a game is complete in the art staff is just it's total. It's a holocaust. Everybody's gone, and they're kind of good-natured about it. They knew this was a short-lived kind of gig. They usually think about the smart ones are thinking about their next job before the end of the game.
Well, going back to the Valiant comics or some of these publishers that are saying, pencils down, or the Valiant thing specifically, or some of the comic stuff. My job, we got an email from the owner, and he is of the opinion that this is not a permanent situation. I think everyone agrees with that, but we have enough capital to kind of weather it out, depending on how it goes, obviously. But I think some of these publishers are just basically week to week, and I think unfortunately some of the comic stores are too.
Yeah.
And so you have an industry that as I said, has limped along for the last several years. Now, people argued with me about it, but I still say it's limped along for the last couple of years.
You know,
And so,
go ahead.
yeah.
Well,
I was just going to say,
This is what happens. This is what happens when you can't see each other and make eye contact. Go ahead.
right. Go ahead, Dave.
well, what I was going to say is my LCS. They're concerned because they don't know if a month worth of product could potentially show up, and that's a big nut to cover, or if it's just going to be, hey, we're going to take 3 or 4 weeks off and we're going to slowly get things in. From what I heard from a podcast I listened to where they interviewed a person that does a big mail order business, she was saying that this next week's product is already at Diamond in the warehouse to be shipped. It won't be shipped, but it's already been printed in there. The product after that is already at the printers. They usually print on Saturdays, which means they would print today if they're going to print. Now, the printing presses may be closed, I don't know. But potentially there's 2 weeks worth of product in the pipeline already. One's done and one could be printed any moment if it's going to be. And so will all that hit at one point, or will they hold it back weekly, or what's the plan? If it all comes like 3 or 4 weeks come at one time, potentially that could be catastrophic for the mom and pop shop that can't cover that big of a nut. We're talking thousands of dollars of product. That's a big concern.
Yeah, the kink, and then all of a sudden it lets loose. Yeah, I see that. Well, that these things, no one can make a living just doing comics anyway, practically, unless you're just like catching some sort of ride on something that's just gotten extremely popular and lasts for a while. You can make some money, but most people just plod along anyway. And business wise, cutting payroll is your number one way to make
Right.
ends meet.
Absolutely. Cut some staff, get rid of some overhead staff.
Yep.
You're not paying their insurance anymore, not paying anything for them anymore.
Yeah,
Cut them
exactly.
loose. And that's going to be a problem for America going forward, probably. A lot of people out of work.
Yeah.
Now, when this all comes back around, there'll be a lot of job openings, but some people won't go back where they came from, obviously. It's going to be a problem.
Well, some people will point this time in history as, thank God for the virus. There'll be new beginnings that happen, but most of us it'll be like that. I don't know if you ever saw that movie that Harmony Korine did, where it was about these kids that are just ne'er-do-wells. What was that called? It was in this little town, and maybe that was by Larry Clark. No, I think it was by Harmony Korine. But they're in this little town that got hit by a twister that just totally ripped all their infrastructure up, and unemployed most of them, and they never get over it. And so the kids become like, they're in Bangladesh or something instead of America. And so they're running around getting into all kinds of gummo. That was the name of it, gummo. Yeah, I recommend that experience. Watch Gummo someday.
Well, Scott, do you have a topic, a book, or something to talk about today?
Yeah, can you guys hear me? You guys are
Oh,
dropping
yeah.
out really bad.
No, you're coming through
fine.
to the best.
I can hear you well. Not a problem.
You can hear me well? Okay, you guys are kind of dropping out on me, but I'm going to go ahead and talk and assume that I'm good, and we'll go from there. So what I was going to talk about is the other day I watched a movie or a documentary called Betty Page Reveals All. Have you ever?
Not at all.
I don't know if you. Oh, okay. You know who Betty Page is, right?
Oh yeah, Dave
Okay.
Stevens.
Stevens Muse.
Yeah, Dave
Muse.
Stevens. Yeah, used her in Rocketeer, or used her likeness in Rocketeer.
Right.
So Betty Page has always been kind of intriguing because, um, like, not a whole lot is known about her. She was kind of a model in the 50s, but like nothing was known about her from her later life. And I started seeing
Well, I thought she got
her.
religion and she kind of regretted all of her stuff she did, didn't she?
Well, actually, the so anyway, I first heard of her because of some of the magazines and stuff that came out about her. I'm not really into that kind of thing, that pinup thing or whatever, but I thought it was interesting. And of course, because of the Dave Stevens thing, and it was kind of known that Dave Stevens had kind of helped her along in her later years. So anyway, so this documentary about her is on Amazon Prime. It's called Betty Page Reveals All. One of the interesting things about it is actually narrated by her. So what they did is they got 6 hours of interviews on tape with her, and then they kind of cut it in with um, some reenactment, some photos, some video of the time period. And so it made kind of an interesting documentary about her. Um, it actually started off with her funeral. Um, her funeral was in kind of a small, you couldn't tell what it was. If it looked like a funeral home maybe, or some kind of chapel, but um, Dave Stevens was there at the funeral. Um, there was a row that was all blonde model types, and in the middle of them was Hugh Hefner, which I
Yeah.
thought was pretty
Yeah.
funny. Um,
Well, you know, she was in his
but the
she was in his magazine, in the 50s or whatever.
Well, it's interesting you say that, and I'll talk about that in a second because they cover that in the documentary. So, but the funeral was officiated by a guy named Robert Schuller. Now, I don't know if you know who Robert Schuller is. You probably don't, but
The
he's
preacher, the preacher
the
Robert Schuller.
preacher Robert Schuller.
Wow,
The
that's big
the
doing.
pre the he yeah, big
He's from the,
time.
he's from
Does
the
a
Crystal
is
Cathedral, isn't he? The Crystal Cathedral.
yeah,
Isn't it?
Crystal Cathedral.
Yep.
Yes, he's the guy that preached the funeral. And
I've been to the
apparently,
Crystal. I went to the Crystal Cathedral one time.
oh really?
Yeah.
I've seen it on TV. When I saw him, I immediately knew who he was, and I was like, "Holy cow!" That's because he's a pretty big time preacher. You wouldn't think he would be doing her funeral, but anyway. So the story starts off, and the documentary basically follows her life. When she was a kid, she had six brothers and sisters. Her parents were divorced when she was 10. Her mom basically ran off with the kids. Um, and so her mom always kind of struggled to take care of the kids. And so when she was young, she was 10. Betty Page was actually put with two of her sisters in an orphanage. And so when she got older, her and her sisters, at one point they got them out of the orphanage, but they lived in the orphanage for a while. And apparently that was kind of a traumatic experience for her, as it would be. Oh, sorry about that. The But when she was a teenager, her and her sisters liked trying on makeup, and they were crazy about the movies, and so they were always kind of putting on these little shows. And she learned to sew, and I didn't realize this, didn't know much about her, but apparently she sewed all of her own outfits. So when you see these famous pictures of her in these leopard bikinis and stuff, she sewed all that throughout the years because she learned to sew when she was a kid.
Nice.
They also spent a lot of time, posing like they were models or whatever. But when she was in high school, she wanted to be her goal was to be class valedictorian, because if you were valedictorian of her class, she went to Hume Fogg High School. Oh, she lived in. Hang on, I'm looking at my notes. I think she lived in Tennessee. I think, if that's correct, or somewhere in the South. But if you graduated as valedictorian, you would get a scholarship to Vanderbilt, and that was her goal. And she missed it by like a tenth of a point. The guy that got it beat her out, so she was salutatorian, and she graduated in 1940. Now, one of the things that's interesting about her, or one of the things that was interesting, was she all throughout the movie she would be doing stuff, and people would ask her age, and she always took 10 years off her age because she looked a lot younger than she was. She was always a lot older than people assumed. So let's see. So after she graduated, she married a guy from a rival high school who was 2 years older than her. She graduated in 1940. 42, she got married. He went, and she said she was always lucky in life except when it came to husbands. Apparently, she was married several times, multiple times. Anyway, so her husband was drafted during the war. He was in the army, and they moved around. They moved to San Francisco. They went to Nashville. They went to Miami, and then she ended up in Port-au-Prince, which they didn't really talk about that in the movie. But she got divorced in 1947, and then she moved to New York. And she wanted to become an actress, but she was a secretary. And at one point, she was talking about she liked to go dancing at night, and so she was always out dancing. So one time, her and a girlfriend of hers were with these two guys that they met dancing. The guy said, "Hey, let's go to this other party," and they're like, "Okay." So they get in this one guy's car and think they're going to like another place to dance or whatever, another club there in Manhattan. And they stop, and like four more guys pile into the car. And so then they go across the bridge, and they go over, I guess, into Brooklyn. And she said, yeah, when they went across the bridge, I knew that we were in trouble. And like, sure enough, they were assaulted by the guys, sexually assaulted by the guys. And so she went back home to Nashville. And so then after a while, she went back to live with her mom, and then she went back to New York, and she was in Coney Island. She was walking along, and she met this police officer who stopped. He was kind of out late, and he stopped. It was a black police officer named Jerry Tibbs, and he was like, "Are you okay? You shouldn't be walking this neighborhood." And she's like, "Oh, no, I'm okay. I live right over here," or whatever. And he got to talking to her, and kind of find out in his spare time he was a photographer. And he said, "You'd make a good model." And he said, "Have you ever modeled?" And she goes, "No." And he gave her his card and said, "You should call me." And so she called him, and so he said, "If you will let me photograph you, I will make you a portfolio of photos that you can show." And so when they went to the first modeling thing, he told her, he goes, "You got kind of a forehead, a high forehead. Have you ever considered growing your bangs out or wearing your hair in bangs?" And so she said, "No, I never thought about that." And so she combed her hair in bangs, which is something she kind of became known for. That kind of set her apart.
That's iconic.
Back in the yes, that was kind of her look that she developed, and it was all because of this police officer. Anyway, so he photographed her. So it wasn't anything. Well, it was cheesy, but it was like a bikini shots. It wasn't anything too bad. Anyway, so then through him, she became a model for these camera clubs. And what this is like in New York, it was a big thing. These guys started what they called camera clubs in the late 40s. And what they would do is they would hire models, and they would go out to like the beach, or they'd go somewhere like out in the woods or somewhere, and they would pay these models, and they'd photograph them. And sometimes they would pay them extra to do nude shots. Sometimes they wouldn't. Sometimes it was just like, pinup kind of shots. But apparently through that, Betty Page realized that, because she would get a cut of how many guys paid. I forget the numbers.
House.
But yeah, she would get a portion of however many, whatever, like she'd get half of the money or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And so she became so popular that they showed there was a picture of one of the groups she went in, and it was her and this other model and probably like 60 photographers, 60 guys
Yeah.
taking photos.
I've seen some of those shots.
It's- Yeah, well, that's the thing is, she did that for 3 years, and so that was where a lot of these pictures that you see of her came from.
The bad
because
ones.
there was none of these. There wasn't like a contract or a model release or anything. These guys just go take pictures, and they could do what they want to with the pictures. And so later on, they start selling them to like men's magazines and stuff. And that's how she became so popular without really being a big model. Is she go out and she do it all the time because she would make more money doing one of these outings than she would in like 3 or 4 weeks of being a secretary doing typing or whatever. And so she would do this, and she became real popular because she would, from the time when she was a kid with her sister, they were always posing and stuff. And so and it talked to some of the photographers that were in these clubs, and they said, oh, they love taking her picture because first off, they said she was good looking. She had a good figure, and she talked about she worked real hard. She worked out a lot and stuff, but she also knew how to pose,
Exactly.
so they wouldn't have to pose her. And she was saying, they said if she was working with a photographer that was kind of new, she would say, well, what if I do this? What if I do this? And so she would kind of lead them along. They didn't have to know how to pose the model because she knew what to do.
Right.
And at some point in this time, she tried out to become a professional model. I forget the agency she went to, but she went to an agency, and they said she looked good. But the problem was she was they said she was too hippie. In other words, she wasn't thin enough. She didn't have a small enough frame to be a model, like a fashion model. And she was also too short. She was like 5'5", I think they said, which I never realized she was that short. But, okay, so then from there, sometime in the early 50s, she got a job working for this photographer named Irving Claw. And what he would do is he had a company that would do mail order photos. And so he didn't do any nudity. There was no nudity in it, but he would do like pinup photos, and he was also known for kind of doing like bondage kind of stuff. And so any bondage photos you see ever kind of came from this time. And she thought it was pretty funny, and it didn't bother her to do those. And this guy's sister, I think her name was Sharon, she was like the partner in the company, and she was pretty good. Supposedly, like one of her things was she knew how to tie these knots that it looked like they were tied up tight, but it was never painful or whatever. She was real good at it. But so then they would do photos, but they also did like 16 millimeter reels that they would send out. So like rich guys would say, hey, here, they would order like custom movies with her in them. And so she became really popular in that. She was one of their most requested models. And so one time, like at the end of the 50s, she had, or the company, there was like an investigation in New York, or there was a Senate hearing to investigate. It was like it was kind of like the comic book thing. Kefauver, yeah, that's Kefauver hearings.
Yeah,
and they were convinced that there was a link between teenage delinquency and kind of this. I think they called it pornography, but it wasn't really pornography because, like I said, there was no nudity in any of her pictures that she did for this. But so this guy, this Claw, got taken before him, and as part of his agreement, he had to destroy all of his photos that he had, all the negatives, everything. And so his sister was kind of in charge of that. Well, his sister, when they were going through they showed his pictures of his file room. He had just tons of filing cabinets full of pictures and movies. And the sister decided that there was no way that she was going to destroy all this. And so she specifically saved maybe not all, but a lot of Betty Page's photos and movies from this time period. And so that's how we have any of that stuff from now. Why does it disappear? So in 1954, so Betty was always going to Miami. I mentioned she lived in Miami. So in 1954, she went to Miami and she met a photographer named Bunny Yeager, or Yeager, I think it's pronounced. So Yeager, somehow they got in contact, and so Yeager was excited because it was so hard to find somebody that would pose for you. And so she took her to a wildlife park in Boca Raton, and they shot photos there with the tigers and stuff, and the cheetahs. That was the big thing. And you've probably seen the picture of her with 2 cheetahs. And in the movie, she talked about she was holding the chains of the cheetahs, and the guy that worked there that let him in, like on the off hours, said, "Don't let those chains go, because if the cheetah takes off, we'll never catch it."
I want my cheetahs. Go ahead.
So Bunny Yeager took a bunch of pictures of her, and one of the most famous ones, of course, she's wearing this, and I think it was in that park. She's wearing the leopard skin bikini that she wore, which is one that she made. So that's how some of those photos came out. And Yeager later sent pictures of Betty Page to Playboy, to Hugh Hefner, and he used one of them as the Playmate of the Month in January 1995, which was, at the time, Playboy was 2 years old, and the photo was her with a Santa hat.
You said 95, but you meant 55.
Oh, 55, yeah. So that was like kind of her kneeling before the Christmas tree, and she's holding an ornament and she's winking at the camera. So that was the Hugh Hefner connection. And so at this point, she went back to New York, and I'm going to stop there. There's more to the story. There was something that happened that made her leave modeling. If you want to know what happened, you'll have to watch Betty Page Reveals All. There's more. What's interesting, if you look on Wikipedia, they'll say, "Oh, there's controversy about why she left modeling." But in the movie, she says exactly what she tells the story about why she left modeling.
Well, that sounds
After she left, she do what, Ellis?
Oh, that sounds very interesting. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh yeah. After she left modeling, she did in 1959. She did become a Christian. She moved to Key West, Florida, or she lived in Key West, Florida, and later she did run into some hard times in her life. Dave Stevens did kind of find. He wasn't really the one that found her, though. There were several guys that were kind of in that circle. I forget what their names, but they formed what they called the Betty Page Scouts, and it was this group of guys that were literally trying to find where she was at. And one of them came in contact with her brother in, I think he was still in Nashville, and this guy contacted him, and he arranged for them to talk. They originally exchanged letters through the brother, and then eventually she felt like she trusted him, so they met. Dave Stevens did at one point take her to the Playboy Mansion, and she met Hugh Hefner. Hugh Hefner was able to, later in her life, Hugh Hefner introduced her to a guy who was an entertainment lawyer who was able to help her get some money for some of this stuff that had gone out, that was out circulating, especially in the 80s. And so she got a little bit of money of that. So she did not die destitute. But she did have problems later in life, and he goes into that in the movie. But that was what I watched the other day. Betty Page, what's it called? Betty Page Reveals All, directed by Mark Morey. And like I said, it was interesting because Betty Page did the narration herself. It was all from interviews that he did with her. Anyway, if you have Amazon Prime and you're interested in that sort of thing, I think it was definitely worth watching.
I would probably watch that. I want to hear what she sounds like. I've never heard her talk, I don't think.
She's got she's got a very southern drawl, if I remember right.
Does she? Okay. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have expected that with all the beach shots and stuff. I would have expected her to be more of like I don't know, not a southern draw, you know.
Perky.
Makes sense if she's from Nashville, though.
Mm-hmm.
Well, hey, since
I wouldn't.
go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say I wouldn't call it a drawl as such, but it's definitely kind of a Georgia. Maybe not that thick, but she does have some kind of accent.
Yeah.
Since all the comic shops are shut down, you might be able to get curbside delivery, or they could ship it to you, or whatever. But what I thought I would do, since I won't be able to pick up comics for a while, I thought I'd read some comics off my to read stack. And, I've got issues, so I thought I'd bring some issues to the show. So I brought 3 issues to the show. First of all, and I'll hold them up. First of all, I brought this. This is Blade Runner, Blade Runner 2019, number 7. Now, if you look at this, it's by Titan Comics. Look at the cover. The cover's by Sid Mead.
Wow.
So I've been buying all the Sid Mead variants. Um, and what they do is, now he passed away late last year, but he's done enough covers to where they're still doing the covers. And what they do is, from what I can tell, is he's done these landscape paintings, and it looks like they're splitting them down the middle and putting half on one issue, then half on another issue, that kind of thing. On some of them, at least, they may not all be that way, but some of them are like 2 sides to the same painting, or opposite sides to the same painting. Very nice covers though. They're the cover B. There's the cover A, which is the regular cover, but the cover B's are the Sid Mead covers. I've been picking all those up, and they're phenomenal. Here, I'll hold it up again.
Yeah. It just now occurred to me to give you a solo layout while you're trying to show us something.
Kind of see what I'm talking about. It's like a go-go dancer, kind of a girl up here on the trying to point to it. But anyways, there's like one that's like on the street. It's kind of raining. There's like a trash truck. There's one I think have got like one of the spinner cars in it. But the Sid Mead covers are really, really nice. Just like his concept looking art. They're really cool. So highly recommend them. But inside the book, this comic, this is issue 7. It kind of reminds me of not only, of course, Blade Runner, but Scott would know this. It kind of reminds me of Dark Minds, which was the Pat Lee DreamWorks comics. I mean, the images aren't the same, but it kind of, when you look at it, it kind of feels like it for some reason to me. And maybe it's because nothing else has been kind of that way since then. And I really like the DreamWorks. I like the Dark Minds quite a bit. And just
Dreamwave.
Dreamwave, thank you. Dreamwave, and then the Dark Minds is the name of the actual issue. His company was called Dreamwave. And Scott, didn't they put those out through Image, or was it his own?
Yeah, that was Image.
Yeah. So it's kind of like Top Cow or whatever, but
yeah, I think it was actually Top Cow.
Oh, was it? But he called it Dreamwave. I remember that. But
yeah, Dreamwave was his studio.
Okay, all right. And he did some other books. He worked on Transformers and some other things also. But Dark Minds was kind of his. I don't know if it was his big thing or not. It was to me, anyways. I like that series a lot. This kind of has sort of the same kind of. When I'm flipping through it, something about it reminds me of that. So to me, that's kind of high praise. I like this story quite a bit. I talked about it on an episode before. The story involves a former Blade Runner named Ash. It's like Anna Asanova or something like that. Anna Ashnine, maybe. But anyway, she's a former Blade Runner, and in the story, she's been sent on this mission to rescue a mom and a daughter. And you find out, or actually, she's looking for the mom and the daughter from the husband. And then you find out she finds them, she locates them, and finds out, well, they're actually running from the husband because he's one of these corporate guys, have all the power, and he's kind of a no good guy, and they went underground to kind of hide from him. And then the story kind of advances from 2019. It kind of advances about 8 years in the future, that kind of thing, while they're in hiding. I think the story's pretty good. It's like issue 7. It feels like it's in the world of Blade Runner. There's some street scenes. There's people running. There's gunfire. There's video screens on the in the streets, like you would see in the Blade Runner movie. Then when there's gunshots, they miss. There's glass breaking. It feels a lot like the Blade Runner. For me anyway, I like it. So that's the first thing I want to bring your attention to. Second thing is a book called Cat Shit One. Yes, it's called
All right.
Cat Shit One. Have you guys seen this?
Uh-uh.
It's Antarctic Press. This is volume one, issue one. It's by a gentleman named Matofumi Kobayashi. And this book, it's Vietnam War, or maybe it's Vietnam War. It's either Vietnam War or Korean War. But if you look at it, it's really nice artwork when the characters are like rabbits and cats.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And look at this artwork though.
It's pretty amazing.
Oh,
Yeah,
it's nice
but-
looking.
Pretty cool.
But does it date back to almost 20 years ago? Because I seem to remember this from like ages ago.
Do you? Well, I was wondering if this is old or not.
Yes.
My gripe about it, a couple little nits on it is, it's not really ink. It's almost like pencils. It's so light, and they put so many panels per page. I wish they had a little bit blown it up a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know how old this is, to tell you the truth. It's been translated to English probably some time ago.
It doesn't say in the front what its original copyright.
Let me see if it does. All I'm seeing is 2020 on it. I don't see anything besides 2020.
Okay.
But what it is, it's missions where these cats and rabbits are going in, and it has like mission one, mission two, mission three kind of a thing. And they're being helicoptered in, just like in Vietnam, and they're going through the dense jungle, and they're trying to save somebody who's got ejected from a downed plane, or they're trying to, rescue a buddy that got left behind, or whatever. But I mean, check this helicopter out right there.
Yeah.
It's really pretty cool artwork. It kind of reminds me a little bit of something like Mouse, or something like not so much Mouse Guard, but you get the idea. It's maybe We Three sort of. It's definitely adult. It's not a kitty thing at all. Um, these animals die. These characters in here die.
I'm going to go answer my doorbell. You guys talk to yourself.
Okay.
And the bad guys seem to be Siamese cats. They look like they're Siamese cats. And maybe he looks a little like Gone. Scott, you remember Gone, the little dinosaur?
Oh yeah, yeah.
I mean, the artwork is literally about that quality, and I think Gone, that's high praise. Gone has really nice artwork. The only thing odd about Gone is it's got all the animals in it, but it's got a little dinosaur running around. The artwork in
Yes.
here is pretty spectacular also. I don't know. My problem is, since this issue has about 4 or 5 missions, you don't get much character development. It's all just they get dropped in, they do their mission, they go on the next mission. Really, not much character development. It's all about just these missions, and some of the same characters are in the same stories or the different stories, but you really don't learn much about the characters. That's kind of the downfall. Is not a lot of character development, and it's shot looks like from pencils. It's pretty lightly colored, or lightly inked or whatever. The back, part of the back, it has some color in it. I don't care for the color as much.
Yeah, it's kind of washy looking.
It is. It's kind of washed out looking, actually. The color section is about maybe 8 pages in the back, and the front part's maybe 20 pages of black and white in the front. And you get a couple text pieces that talk about the Vietnam War and about Korea and things like that. It's a really nice package. I don't know if I'll stick with it or not. It looks nice, but the character development, it's just kind of so-so. What I wanted to bring to the podcast, though, my winner of the week is this book, Marvel Snapshot Fantastic Four.
Oh yeah.
So what this basically is It's the 25th anniversary of Marvel. They're doing some Marvel stuff. Alex Ross, Kurt Busiek's doing some Marvel stuff for Marvel right now. Three different things actually. One of them is called Snapshots, and the Snapshots is about they're going to be 8 one-shots. So there's been a Namor one. This is the Fantastic Four one. The next one's Captain America. They're all standalone stories done by various writers, various artists. It's kind of curated by Kurt Busiek. It's an oversized comic. It's probably 34 pages, maybe 40. I don't know. And the gist of it is Johnny Storm's going back to his hometown 10 years after his graduation for his 10th graduation party or whatever. The
Okay.
reunion, his class reunion 10 years later. And so he's going to go back and he's going to go back, he's going to see his classmates. And so this news crew are going to interview one of his classmates who used to date Johnny Storm 10 years ago back in high school. So the news crew show up at her house. Her name's Dory, and it shows Dory kind of getting dressed. She goes downstairs, meets the news crew, tells her kids goodbye. She's kind of a single mom. Her dad's going to watch the kids, and she's going to go to this high school class reunion, senior reunion. And Johnny Storm's supposed to show up. And so on the way there, the cameraman and the reporter are driving this lady to the class reunion. They're kind of interviewing her on the way, saying, you grew up with Johnny Storm. What was he like back in those days? You dated him and that kind of thing. And on the way there, they stop off at like the Fantastic Four Museum. And this takes place supposedly in Glenville, New York, is where the Storms are supposed to be from. Now, Glenville is not on Long Island. I looked it up. Glenville is actually up by Poughkeepsie, so it's kind of upper New York, kind of between Schenectady and Syracuse. It's nowhere near where I thought that the Storms would have grown up if this is in fact the same Glenville as the real Glenville. I don't know. But anyways, they go to this museum. They see all this Fantastic Four stuff. It's been uh, put there from the Fantastic Four in Glenville. And they kind of have a little tour of the museum. Then they go to the high school, and sure enough, Johnny Storm shows up, and he's kind of a dick. He's kind of like he kind of blows in, and people want to come up and talk to him, and he's kind of like, "Sure, Al," and he's like, "Well, yeah, my name's not really Al," and things like that. He doesn't know people's names very well, and his former girlfriend he doesn't really give much the time of day to, and the reporter and the cameraman want a little time with him, and he's kind of blowing him off. So yeah, I'll talk to you later, and he's kind of the toast of the party, and in fact, the DJ's playing songs like "Burning Down the House" and "Hot, Hot, Hot," and they've kind of made it kind of all about Johnny Storm and not the fact it's the graduation uh, or the reunion party or whatever. And so at the end of it, or toward the end of it, people start leaving because they're kind of put off by Johnny Storm and the way he's acting. People kind of start leaving. So the cameraman and the reporter lady are like, "Well, let's get out of here. This is kind of a bust, and we'll just try to use what we've got from the interviews and try to make a 2 or 3 minute segment on TV or whatever." And they're kind of leaving, and the lady they were with that dated Johnny Storm, Dory, she's kind of going to leave too or whatever. But she says she'll just walk home. She doesn't want them to take her home. She's going to walk because she acts like she's kind of miffed about what's going on at the high school reunion. So, but the reporter lady kind of senses there's something not right here. What's really going on here? Something just doesn't feel right. At this point, you're 3 quarters into the book, if not further, and you're like, kind of like the story's kind of wrapping up. But what they do is they kind of hang back and they kind of follow Dory as she's walking home, and they realize, well, Dory's not really walking home; she's walking somewhere else. They kind of follow her, and she goes down to the beach. Now, my thought is if Glenville's really like on Long Island, yeah, it could be by the beach. But if it's in like upstate New York, this beach has got to be at a lake, right? But they
Yeah.
but they get there and there's some other classmates there, and so the photographer and the camera, the lady, the host of the show or whatever, the segment or whatever, the reporter lady and the photographer are kind of hanging back, kind of hiding behind what looked like a sand dune, which kind of makes me think this is at the ocean. But anyway,
Yeah.
the other high school, a lot of the classmates are down there on the beach or whatever, kind of hanging out, and you see they've all got their sunglasses on. This is like nighttime. Then you see that the Dory, she reaches down to her bracelet, which when she was getting ready, it shows her putting her bracelet and her earrings on at her house. She reaches for her bracelet, and she kind of clicks it a little bit. She kind of turns the little thing on the bracelet, and all of a sudden there's this big flash of light that lights up the whole beach. And sure enough, like this portal opens up, and Lockjaw and Johnny Storm end up walking out of it, and they've got like food and kegs of beer and marshmallows and wood, and they start a big bonfire, and it's a big party, and he's not the dick you think he is, and it was all just for show, and all of his favorite classmates are then to have this big bonfire, and he talks to the door, and he's cool to her, and all this, and so it's a completely different Johnny Storm than his persona that he gave the reporter for the news stories. This story really reminded me, and I thought it was really well written. I liked it a lot. It reminded me of the Best of Astro City, which Kurt Busiek used to do before it I guess, was canceled. DC was going to come back with it, but it never really happened. And that's been over almost 2 years ago at this point, probably. But it reminded me of the Best of Astro City. It's like a story that they had flashbacks in the museum that showed you what the Fantastic Four had done before on like video flashbacks. But it had Johnny Storm as coming off as a dick to all these people that he knew. But in the end, it showed like the real Johnny Storm or whatever. I thought it was pretty cool. The artwork was really cool. This was written by Evan Dorkin and Sarah Dyer, and it was drawn by Benjamin Dewey. Jordy Belair did the colors. It looks nice. The artwork's got some good flashback sequences, plus some current sequences, and some of those kind of remind me of All Red a little bit. So the artwork's pretty solid. The story was really cool, and it's kind of reminding me, like I said, the best of Astro City when that was fired in all cylinders. I highly recommend it. So it's called Marvel's
Snapshots.
Fantastic Four issue with a nice Alex Ross cover. So there you go. Kind of
Hey, Evan Dorkin, did he do something called the World's Angriest Milkman or something like that?
I think
no, he was Milk and Cheese.
Oh, Milk and Cheese. Okay.
Yeah, I was going to say, I thought he did something pretty notable. I didn't know the name of it, though.
Yeah.
Milk and Cheese, cool.
Or Milk and Cheese. I've got that somewhere.
Yeah, so the best book I read this week, I thought it was definitely worth checking out. So anyway, single issue comics. There you go. Ellis, you have something you want to talk about today?
Well, get this layout back to normal. I thought it'd be better if we were looking at DL while he was talking to us. The coolest thing I'm doing right now is I burn these files that you can borrow from the library onto disk and drive around listening to them. Audiobooks. No, I'm surely everybody does that. And
not me.
I guess it's pirating, isn't it? Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Borrowing.
Cut that out. No. It'll entertain everybody to understand that I'm I pirate.
No,
but I'm listening.
What are you listening? What are you listening to?
I'm listening to Harlan Ellison, The Voice from the Edge, Volume 2. And I tell you what, it's really bringing back what a great talent Ellison was, and the fact that he's reading them himself. At first, the first 2 minutes of it, I said, oh, this is going to be awful. He's going to overact, and it's not going to be good. But then you forget that Ellison was a pro of getting on stage and reading you his stories. And that's what he's doing here, is reading us his stories. And it's great. He's just a great guy that gets into the heart of his characters and just really makes you care about where he's going with the story. And he's probably too clever, but he's a fun, clever guy to be listening to. And they're not always science fiction. I just listened to this one about an old sheriff that was brought in because he was such a hard ass that, they brought him in as a hired killer. The town had to be cleaned up, and then the town outgrows that, and he becomes, somebody that they've got to get rid of. And so that morphing of that thing, it was just a real cool premise. And, he's always got a great payoff in terms of like a little personal moment that tells you that, wow, it's just, a good ending is always great. And he always has he understood you had to have a hook as well. So he's always got a great beginning, and he's just I'm just about to define a story, a beginning, a middle, and an end. He does all of them well, so.
Yeah.
And what else am I? And I recently saw a John Garfield movie. I don't know how much John Garfield you've seen, but of course the classic is the.
Wasn't he the president?
What?
Was he the president?
Yes, it was a movie about the president.
I think he may have been a
documentary.
Come to think of it,
not the same John Garfield.
Oh, okay.
But he was in The Postman Always Rings Twice, the first one.
Oh, that's right.
Which is a great little story. And in this one, it's called the Breaking Point, which there was something that caused me to surf onto it and get intrigued by it. And man, it's by let's see. It's by Michael Curtiz, who I believe, he did Casablanca, and he may have done several other things. He may have done something that we did on Classic Cinema podcast, come to think of it. Michael Curtiz, but it's well directed, and it's a story. It's an Ernest Hemingway story that was done 10 years before this by Bogart and, his wife, that stunner, what's her name?
Bacall.
Bacall, yeah. They had done it as To Have and To Have Not, which is the name of the Hemingway story. But this one is apparently the closer adaptation. And man, you really get involved with this poor guy's plight. He's got his back up against the wall, and he's got a wife and 2 daughters. And he's got a boat that he goes out and takes for fishing excursions. And so, when you've got that tool of a boat, you've got, shaky kinds of types that say, let's use that boat to do a little smuggling of this and that.
Yep.
And so he's got these guys, and it's just great the way he plays off of this one sleazy lawyer. He just doesn't want to be around the guy, but the guy will not take no for an answer. It's a great little bit of chemistry that goes on between them. And that's what you see in this Garfield, is that you see why he is a star. And it's interesting, you look at this guy, he's totally vital, looks like he could be a star for the next 20 years. And he was dead within 2 years. He had a heart attack. And so he ended everything about, I don't think he quite made 50. So,
yeah.
Oh, geez.
So it was pretty good. He's one of those guys that you look at and say, yeah, that guy's a star. So that's it. And that was, I had to rent that on Amazon Prime. And so then I talked about it on Twitter, and someone instantly linked me up with a YouTube for free that, it's all out there. A guy needs to go do his due diligence and do a search before you buy anything, I guess.
Oh, wow.
Most of it's out there for free.
So some do-gooder was like, "Hey man, you could have just got this for free."
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but what did it cost you on Prime? Like $3?
Well, $1.99. It's such an old movie. It's practically public domain. Yeah.
Right.
So do you rent it for that, or is that your copy? It's the rental.
No, $1.99 was the rental.
Yeah. Okay.
They let you have it for 48 hours or longer. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you guys ready to wrap this thing up?
Yep, I need to go.
Okay, yeah. We've been at it for exactly an hour. So sorry we couldn't have Barry here. We could go on for another hour. Just kidding. Okay, you guys want to say anything before you go? Your usual?
Yeah, Dave, give the sign out.
Well, Okay, as always, I've been your host, D.L. Nilsson, joined by my other hosts
Scott Sackett.
and our special guest.
Here, it wouldn't be possible without me, Ellis Goodson.
This is true. Thank you, Ellis.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely true.
Thanks for hosting this for us, Ellis.
You bet.
And it's too
Yeah.
bad Barry couldn't hang in there. Hopefully, we can get his situation ironed out for the next episode. Also, I want to say for any listeners out there, we're going to hopefully we can keep this going on and keep the.
Hopefully, we
episode-
don't need to.
Well, I mean, if we have to, we want to do an episode a week or whatever we got to do. But hopefully, we can keep this going if we can, and hopefully, eventually, we can all get back together.
Absolutely.
Definitely check out our blog at betterthanfictionpodcast.blogspot.com, where I'll post some photos of what we've talked about tonight.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please take a second to subscribe on iTunes and leave a review. This will help other people find our podcast. Also, if you enjoy this podcast, please check out our other podcast where Ellis is always with us, and that is called Classic Cinema Podcast. We do a monthly review of a classic movie. The next movie, whenever we can get together, because we have to do that in person, because we do it over at Barry's house, and we watch the movie on his home theater, is It, the Terror from Beyond Space.
Yeah.
I've never seen it. I can't wait to see it. So that's coming up. Whenever we get the all clear sign.
God,
Yeah.
when is that going to be?
I don't know. It'll happen.
At least a month,
faith.
I would think.
No. 3 weeks.
Well, we've already
2
been doing
weeks.
this for 2, right? We're on the
Yeah.
second week of this mess.
Yeah,
I
two
thought
weeks
this-
will be
I
a
thought
month.
I thought it was only going to be a 3-week deal to begin with. We're on the last week, aren't we?
Yeah, you wish.
Why would this be the
Just
last week?
started.
Yeah.
No,
I
it's
kind of
just
felt like
started.
I kind of felt like we've already been doing this for 2 weeks.
Yeah. No, it's
Nope.
just
No, we've been doing it for about 4 days.
Whatever.
It just feels like 2 weeks.
yeah.
The official Oklahoma shutdown was 3 weeks, and that started Thursday.
Yeah.
Thursday.
Yeah. Yes,
Well, we've been
Thursday.
talking. I guess my problem is we've been talking about it for so long.
Yeah, well,
Right, but
people have
but
been
in
taking their own
Oklahoma-
steps. Yeah.
Right. In Oklahoma, the official shutdown started Thursday. It was for 3 weeks.
Oh my God, I'll never make it.
Well, what's funny is a bunch of my coworkers are just off work, and I pulled some strings so I could work at home, and I thought, what an idiot! I should have just stayed off work too.
Well,
I
hang on,
could have got a lot.
but you're getting paid for it working at home, though. They're not, are they?
They get they can take vacation, or
right.
the emergency thing gives you 2 weeks of pay.
What emergency thing?
No, there's an emergency thing.
You mean at your work?
No, it's a federal thing.
Really?
Anyway, yeah.
Cool.
Anyway, hey, I gotta go, guys.
You got to go. Okay. Well,
See you guys
I
next
gotta-
week.
we'll
next
see you
week,
next
see-
time.
you
Ending
guys.
broadcast. Bye-bye.
See you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.